Many times that affects the service delivery, and we try to even up so that our employees and the resources that we have to give you those services are kind of balanced so that we can meet the needs of all our neighborhoods. And our solid waste department today tried to make some notification on our carts for our solid waste pickup that we're changing the date of pickup in one of our neighborhoods near the Mitchell-Nielsen area. And it's roughly an area from Battleground Drive to West Clark to Memorial to Medical Center Parkway. And it would include, among some streets, Gray Bar, Kingwood, Allen, Nancy, Susan, Shelley, Hamilton, Peachtree, Sawyer, Nelson, a lot of streets that all of us are very familiar with in our traditional downtown area, Woodmont, Elliott, Dogwood, and those. You'll notice on your cart that there's a little notice saying that we're going to move the day of service for about 1,500 residential customers from Thursday to Monday. And I'm sorry for that inconvenience, but it will help us to maintain our service level in that area and make sure that you get the type of solid waste pickup that you desire in those areas. So again, if you've got some questions about that, you can call the mayor's office at 849-2629. But the Thursday service in that particular area will be changing over to Monday service. So I just wanted you to be aware of that. And I would appreciate any suggestions you may have on that. And I know some of you that may be an inconvenience, and some it may be, like me, a little memory thing where it's kind of hard to remember to go out on Monday morning and do it like you've been doing it on Thursday. So forgive us for changing that, but hopefully this will let us balance out our service level across our community. Council members, before you have your consent agenda tonight, and you'll notice that item G, recommendations of the City Treasurer or Personnel Director with regards to the GASB 45 OPEB 2009 Valuation Engagement Letter, has been changed. And with that one change, it's just a revision of one sentence, I believe, being deleted, or maybe two sentences. That's the only change that I see on your consent agenda. But so if you have any questions on other items of your consent agenda, now's the time to bring those up. And if not, I will take and accept a motion to accept our consent agenda.
So moved. Second.
All right, you have a motion and second on the consent agenda as revised. Please call the roll, Ms. Wright.
Vice Mayor Bratcher.
Aye.
Mr. Edwards.
Aye.
Mr. Gilly.
Aye.
Mr. McFarland.
Aye.
Mr. Washington.
Aye.
Mr. Young.
Aye.
Mayor Bragg.
Aye. Mr. Washington just reminded me that I didn't give you the date that we're going to change that service for solid waste, and that's beginning, I guess, the Monday, October the 5th. So I apologize for not bringing you the date, but October the 5th, that area roughly between Battleground and Memorial and north to West Clark and south to Medical Center Parkway will change October the 5th. Again, if there's any questions, please call the mayor's office at 849-2629. All right, this time we'll consider for passage on third and final reading an ordinance to amend the zoning ordinance as regards planned signage overlay PSO district located at Medical Center Parkway.
Mayor, move for passage on third and final reading.
All right, you have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Bratcher.
Aye.
Mr. Edwards.
Aye.
Mr. Gilly.
Aye.
Mr. McFarland.
Aye.
Mr. Washington.
Aye.
Mr. Young.
Aye.
Mayor Bragg.
Aye. Consider now for passage on second reading an ordinance to amend approximately 72 acres of a PUD located along Rucker Lane.
So moved.
Second.
And with a second, please call the roll, Ms. Wright.
Vice Mayor Bratcher.
Aye.
Mr. Edwards.
Aye.
Mr. Gilly.
Aye.
Mr. McFarland.
Aye.
Mr. Washington.
Aye.
Mr. Young.
Aye.
Mayor Bragg.
Aye. At this time, we'll consider for passage on second reading an ordinance to rezone an area located along Agri Park Drive to Highway Commercial CH District.
Move for approval on second reading. Second.
We have a motion and a second. Please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Bratcher.
Aye.
Mr. Edwards.
Aye.
Mr. Gilly.
Aye.
Mr. McFarland.
Pass.
Mr. Washington.
Aye.
Mr. Young.
Aye.
Mayor Bragg.
Aye. We'll consider now for passage on second reading an ordinance to amend .29 acres of a PCD and rezone .11 acres from RM16 to PCD for property located at the northeast corner of Hancock Street and East Castle Street.
Move for passage on second reading. Second.
All right, you have a motion second. Please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Bratcher.
Aye.
Mr. Edwards. Mr. Gilly.
Aye.
Mr. McFarland.
Aye.
Mr. Washington.
Aye.
Mr. Young.
Aye.
Mayor Bragg.
Aye. We'll consider now for passage on second reading an ordinance amending Appendix C, the Employees Revised Pension Trust Agreement of the Murfreesboro City Code.
So moved. Second.
Please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Bratcher.
Aye.
Mr. Edwards.
Aye.
Mr. Gilly.
Aye.
Mr. McFarland.
Aye.
Mr. Washington.
Aye.
Mr. Young.
Aye.
Mayor Bragg.
Aye. At this time, we'll consider for approval a certificate of compliance for Barbara Hudson Fry and Arthur Curtis Hudson, Jr. at Bubba's Wine and Liquor, 2510 South Church Street. Is right?
Mayor, this is a 2-year requirement for a business that's already been established by the state. They have met our requirements for us to sign the paperwork and send it to the state.
All right. They've met all requirements. Is there a motion that we approve this certificate of compliance?
Move to be approved. Second.
Motion and second. Please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Bratcher.
Aye.
Mr. Edwards.
Aye.
Mr. Gilly.
Aye.
Mr. McFarland.
Aye.
Mr. Washington.
Aye.
Mr. Young.
Aye.
Mayor Bragg.
Aye. You have received your renewal. Thank you. This time pursuant to a resolution adopted by the City Council on August the 13th, 2009, we will conduct a public hearing to consider rezoning approximately 6.78 acres along St. Andrews Drive from RS-15 to a PCD. Notice of said public hearing was published in the August 30th, 2009 issue of the local newspaper. Welcome, Ms. Ely.
Thank you, Mayor and council members. The first and only public hearing this evening is to consider rezoning property located on the southwestern corner of Highway 99, also called New Salem Highway, and St. Andrews Drive. The property consists of 2 parcels and has 1 single-family house up on it. Currently, that house is occupied, but it's anticipated that the resident will move from that house if and when the zoning change is approved. The property to the north is zoned CF, which is Fringe Commercial District. On the northeastern corner is the site where a future Publix grocery store will go. On the northwestern side, there's currently a veterinary office and clinic. To the east of the property is an area zoned PUD, Planned Unit District, and is the location of the Boxwood Plantation Planned Development, which is currently undeveloped, but we have approved plans in the future. To the west and to the south, property is zoned RS-15 and RS-12. That's the location of the Bell Haven and the Bell Reeve single-family subdivisions, which are in the city. And to the northwest is the area which is in the unincorporated area of Rutherford County. This request is to rezone the 2 parcels from their current RS-15 zone to PCD, Planned Commercial District. The applicant does not have any specific plans regarding this property at this time, but would like to develop it commercially. The applicant also believes that this request is in concert with the Salem Pike Land Use Plan and would be an appropriate use of the property. To give staff and city some assurances that the development on this parcel will be of a nice quality, that he has volunteered to place this under the GDO review process, and also that the development will meet the Gateway Design Overlay District standards. Staff does expect that at some time in the future, when these properties develop with commercial outparcels, that the developers will be required to submit traffic studies and design plans, and at that time we'll closely review those and make sure that this is the best development that can happen. I did include a pattern book outlining the applicant's request in your agenda materials, so if you have any questions you can reference that. The City Council did schedule a public hearing to consider zoning 6.7 acres located on the southwestern corner of Highway 99 and St. Andrews Drive to PCD. Staff is available for any questions you have either before or after the public hearing. The Planning Commission did approve this request unanimously, and that's their recommendation to you. The applicant's representative, Steve Dotson, is in attendance tonight. He does not have a presentation regarding the matter, but if you have questions, he'd also be available to answer them. So at this time, we should conduct a public hearing if you have no questions from me.
Any questions of Ms. Ely at this time? Vice Mayor?
Yeah, Mayor, I would like to just let the council and you and the public be aware that I do work for Red Realty. I'm employed by that firm, but I do not have any interest in this property whatsoever. I don't have it listed, or I have no gain financially whatsoever, so I'll probably be passing on the vote. So I'll point that out.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Any questions for Ms. Ely? If not, we'll open the public hearing at this time. Anyone wishing to speak for or against this rezoning, please step to the microphone and give us your name and address. Is anyone here wishing to speak? Anyone at all? If not, I'll close the public hearing at this time, and we'll consider for passage on first reading an ordinance to rezone an area located along St. Andrews Drive to a planned commercial development, PCD district.
So moved.
All right, you have a motion and second. Please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Bratcher.
Pass.
Mr. Edwards. Mr. Gilly. Mr. McFarland. Mr. Washington. Mr. Young.
Aye.
Mayor Bragg.
Aye. At this time, we'll consider recommendations of the Water and Sewer Board with regards to adoption of policies, procedures, and general design requirements manual for the Murfreesboro Water and Sewer Department.
Thank you,
Welcome,
Mayor.
Mr. Kirchner.
Thank you. This evening, the Water and Sewer Board recommends some work staff has done on putting together some policies and procedures and general design requirements for the department to give an outline to those that want to develop in our service area of a roadmap of how to the best way to do that, and some requirements that might be if there are concerns with of supply or demand in certain areas. We've vetted this policy with sending it out to some stakeholders. We also put it for 8 months on our website. We had some comments from Joe Swanson Jr. and Hudson Steel and Engineering, incorporated those as we could, and the Water and Sewer Board recommends adopting these policies, procedures, and general design requirements.
It's quite an extensive document
Yes, sir.
that you have, Mr. Kirchner. How similar is it to the previous document?
There was no previous document. It's a compendium of different practices and policies that we've had, and then we tried to outline. So if someone came in and said, what do I need to do, we can hand them this, and there's some checklists and things there they could go by and we'll certainly help them through it, but what they would need to do. Certainly larger developments would be more complex than a small development, but especially when there's people come in, there's a large parcel of land, they want to know, what do I need to do to get sewer here? This kind of outlines what they would need to do on the standpoint of getting their engineer and consultant to review and present to us facts and figures that would allow us to determine the availability.
Would you call this a technical document or a legal document?
More technical.
Legal is technical.
Council okay with
Well, I applaud the effort that went into putting this together. Obviously, many people think in some instances that we make snap decisions, but obviously a lot of thought, a lot of time, and setting objectives and goals has been put into this document, and I applaud you for it. I'm not sure that I could tell you that I have read every word of it, Mr. Kirchner, but I'm going to lean on you for guidance with this, and I think all of our council would be very pleased to know the effort that went into this.
I'd have to give credit to Darren Gore and his staff. They really studied this and did a lot of research and pulled together a lot of different things we've had in the past and tried to explain it more as precisely as they could with what would need to be done if someone started from scratch.
This is really an extension of what we saw with the subdivision regulations and the street specifications. You know, we're all well aware that Murfreesboro's had a period of very rapid growth, and now that things have slowed down some, this is our opportunity to take the tools back to the shop, sharpen them up, so that when things do pick back up, we'll have current tools and the latest and greatest. So my hat's off to staff and the hard work that they did to put this together, so when things do pick up, we'll be in good shape.
Can we defer this till you read it?
And
Shall we defer this till Mr. Gore gets here so we can thank him for doing it?
Mr. Kirchner, and I assume this document, you know, although it's we put a lot of thought into it, we're probably going to see areas that we need to improve. So although this is a sharpened tool, we're not going to stab ourselves with it. We can go back and make changes as we see things that need to be
Certainly.
be changed.
Yeah, that's, you know, this is a living, I take it as a living document. You know, it wasn't perfect I could work on it forever and it's not be perfect, but we got it to the point where I think it's a valuable tool to us, and as we see we need to make changes, we certainly will.
All right, you have this recommendation from the Water and Sewer Department. Is there a motion that we adopt?
So moved.
Second.
Motion and second. Please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Bratcher.
Aye.
Mr. Edwards.
Aye.
Mr. Gilly.
Aye.
Mr. McFarland.
Aye.
Mr. Washington.
Aye.
Mr. Young.
Aye.
Mayor Bragg.
Aye. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you.
Kirchner. This time we'll consider recommendations of the Community Development Director with regards to a neighborhood stabilization program, purchase contracts, the microenterprise loan pool policies and procedures, and the homeless prevention and rapid rehousing program grant. Welcome, Ms. Pope.
Thank you. And I am not the Community Development Director, but in his absence, I'm going to present this information to you.
Good.
I think previously you had received a letter that made reference to 3 activities that are going to be carried out by the Community Development Department with some funding that we received from the Department of HUD. And we've reached a point in each of these activities where we need to request your approval to proceed. The first in that letter was the Neighborhood Stabilization Program purchase contracts. The Neighborhood Stabilization Program is one where we are helping to assist with the foreclosure, vacant home crisis that is here in Murfreesboro. The Department of HUD has determined that there are 4 eligible census tracts in Murfreesboro, and because of the rate and the number of foreclosures, we're eligible to spend some money there to stabilize those communities by helping people to purchase those homes and move into them. So one of the programs we have in our department is under the Affordable Housing Assistance Program that already exists. To give you a little bit of information on that and hopefully to let the general public know tonight, we do have money available to help home buyers. You do not have to be a first-time home buyer, but we have money available to help a home buyer who is purchasing a vacant, foreclosed property, eligible for a mortgage loan with a lender, and if you meet the guidelines under our NSP program, we can help with as much as $14,999 in the form of a grant that can be used for down payment and closing costs. We've already closed on one of those homes, and we plan to close on another one just in the next couple of days. The program that I'm here tonight to ask for some approval on is actually the purchase of vacant foreclosed homes, and under this program through the Community Development Department we are allowed to, with this NSP money, to purchase vacant foreclosed homes, and then we will resell them to eligible home buyers here in the community. Of the $447,379 that was budgeted, $297,380 is budgeted for this purchase of foreclosed properties. And right now we have been in negotiations with an owner of 2 of those vacant foreclosed homes here in the community, and with the help of our legal department have reached the point where we are ready to sign contracts, and you have copies of those contracts, I believe, in your file. As part of the rules for NSP, it requires that we get an appraisal of that property, and the sale of these homes have to be at a 1% discount to the government entity that's purchasing them. We've ordered those appraisals, and any purchase would be contingent on satisfying the discount provision. We expect the final executed contracts to be basically in the form that you see them now. However, if there are any substantial changes to those, it will be to the legal department here with the city to help with negotiating that. We recommend that you approve the 2 purchase contracts subject to approval in final form by the city attorney. The properties that are under contract or pending contract with us right now are at 455 Stetson Court and 925 Wolves Den. The total price for both properties would be $227,800.
Ms. Pope, step us through the money. The money comes from...
It actually comes from, it comes from the Department of HUD, and this neighborhood stabilization money actually was awarded to states across the nation, and the money is to be handled by the state housing agency. So THDA was the recipient of that funding originally here with the state. And because Murfreesboro qualified, having these 4 census tracts that qualified, we applied for that funding and actually presented to y'all our strategy and determination of how we could best use that money here, which was to help to help home buyers purchase those homes, and then for us to purchase and, if necessary, rehab some of those homes and then resell them. The money coming from the resale of those homes, we would not be making a profit on it. We put it back into the pool of money, purchase more homes, and sell them again to low and moderate income households.
So the money stays in our community to do this with more homes as long as homes exist?
Correct, as long as the money is there. Mm-hmm. There is a time...
Do these homes require rehabbing before we resell them?
Some of them may. We've actually been into, we have, even through our affordable housing program that's funded with community development block grant dollars, we have been very active lately and, in fact, almost exhausted our community development block grant funds for that program and helping people purchase homes. And we've seen a lot of foreclosed homes here in Murfreesboro sell. And in going on those homes with the codes inspectors, some of them are, need repair and work done. In fact, we just helped finance a HUD foreclosed home the other day, and the carpet was ripped out, certain items missing in the home that have to be replaced before they can actually move in. But a lot of the homes that we go in are in fine shape. But if the homes that we purchase, if they do need rehab, then as part of this program, we will use the money to rehab those homes before they are sold.
All right, other questions on these purchase contracts?
Move for approval.
All right, you have a motion to approve these 2 purchase contracts. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Motion second. Please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Bratcher.
Aye.
Mr. Edwards.
Aye.
Mr. Gilly.
Aye.
Mr. McFarland.
Aye.
Mr. Washington.
Aye.
Mr. Young.
Aye.
Mayor Bragg.
Aye.
And the next item in your letter was the micro enterprise loan pool. And what we're doing tonight is actually asking for your approval of the policies and procedures that was included in your packet for review. This is a program that would not be unique to Murfreesboro. It's actually an economic development program that is eligible as an expenditure with our community development block grant funds, and for some years we have been wanting to do something like this in Murfreesboro. So we hope to implement this program with your approval, and what we want to do is actually provide access to capital and to the necessary items that it would take for someone who already owns a micro enterprise business or for someone who wants to implement a micro enterprise business here in Murfreesboro.
All right, questions on this micro enterprise loan fund and these policies and procedures that you've been presented?
Move for approval.
Second.
All right, you have a motion and a second to approve these policies and procedures. Call the roll, Ms. Wright.
Vice Mayor Bratcher.
Aye.
Mr. Edwards.
Aye.
Mr. Gilly.
Aye.
Mr. McFarland.
Aye.
Mr. Washington.
Aye.
Mr. Young.
Aye.
Mayor Bragg.
Aye.
Mayor, I'll take a minute to back up and say that for both of those programs that I just mentioned, for anyone listening or for anyone here as council, know that the policies and procedures and all of the information about the NSP programs that we offer are now on the city's website and available to the public, and we're trying to get that information out there. We have a time limit on most of our HUD funding that we need to spend, but we want everybody to know they can go to the city's website or they can call our office at 890-4660 and ask for any printed information that they need to access those programs. They're all to benefit low and moderate households here in the city, and we want to be sure everyone gets the information.
Thank you, Ms. Pope. That number is 890-4660. Thank you.
The next item is the Homeless Prevention and Rapid Rehousing Program. And actually, what we want to do is to give a little information on it, but we are requesting and recommend that you actually approve for us to be the recipient of a grant in the amount of $401,222. I think the letter that you got spelled that out, that in the year 2009 it would be $200,611, and for 2010 it would be $200,611, and then there was a chart there that said for if it ran into a third year as a recipient of this grant funding, which comes through the department, through the Tennessee Housing Development Agency, that there could be some additional funding available. This funding is the City of Murfreesboro would be a recipient of it, and we're asking that we be able to receive that grant money and to make the Murfreesboro Housing Authority the one that actually administers that funding. The purpose of it is to provide critical housing stability to individuals and families threatened with homelessness due to recent economic conditions. It comes from the Department of HUD to the states through the Tennessee Housing Development Agency, and then to the local government entity, which would be the City of Murfreesboro. And because the Murfreesboro Housing Authority is the administrator of our continuum of care, we are partnering with them to administer this funding. Through the Community Development Department, our role in this would basically be to report to THDA the use of those funds and to send in the documentation to receive the money from their office.
All right, are there any questions regarding this Homeless Prevention and Rapid Rehousing Program grant, which will flow through the city and be administered through the Murfreesboro Housing Authority? If not, is there a motion that we accept this grant award and enter into this sub-recipient agreement?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. A motion and second. Please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Bratcher.
Aye.
Mr. Edwards.
Aye.
Mr. Gilly.
Aye.
Mr. McFarland.
Aye.
Mr. Washington.
Aye.
Mr. Young.
Aye.
Mayor Bragg.
Aye. Thank you, Ms. Pope.
Thank you.
This time we'll consider recommendations of the city manager regarding an agreement with the Rutherford County Chamber of Commerce for the new Visitor Center and Chamber Office Building, and also for an asset liability study and proposal for expanded consulting services from Chartwell Consulting. Mr. Lyons.
Thank you, Mayor Bragg. What we have before you on the first item is an agreement with the Rutherford County Chamber of Commerce. Pleased to report to you that we held the pre-construction conference this week for that new building. The notice to proceed will be issued on Monday, and construction will be beginning next week. That project is expected to be completed by November 20th of 2010. Once construction is complete, the chamber will be occupying that building and running the visitor center. But as we've talked to you a few times, this building is going to be owned by the city of Murfreesboro. So this agreement that now memorializes the relationship between the city and the chamber for this building. As we explained during the presentation of the construction contract, because this is a city-owned building, the city will have approximately, no more than $1.5 million toward the construction cost. However, the city will recoup that $1.5 million from the chamber plus 3% interest over a 15-year period. So this lease will set forth who is responsible for what, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Any questions from Mr. Lyons regarding this long-anticipated visitor center and chamber office? Seeing none, is there a motion that we accept this agreement with the Rutherford County Chamber for the new visitor center and the chamber office building?
So moved.
Second.
All right, you have a motion and second. Are there any questions on the motion? If not, please call the roll, Ms. Wright.
Vice Mayor Bratcher.
Aye.
Mr. Edwards.
Aye.
Mr. Gilly.
Aye.
Mr. McFarland.
Aye.
Mr. Washington.
Aye.
Mr. Young.
Aye.
Mayor Bragg.
Aye.
The next item is a carryover from your last council meeting. We added an item under other business, and we apologize that we did not give you more time to review this information, but hopefully you've had an opportunity to read through this. And we have had a relationship with Chartwell Consulting in assisting the pension fund for a number of years. We believe they've provided an excellent service to the pension fund and really serving as an analyst of what is happening in the pension fund and giving guidance to them about the assets that are invested, the mix of investment vehicles, and then also giving an opportunity to look at how the performance of the funds are doing. So we need to take a look at the asset liability study and update that. That was the first part of the recommendation. But what Chartwell did this year was they gave a presentation to the pension committee to take their level of service up one step. Right now, they've been providing recommendations for specific actions to be taken by the pension committee. And what this expanded role would do is actually put them in a position of implementing the decisions that have been made by the pension committee. So they become a little more active and hands-on, all within the boundaries and the guidance of what has been pre-established by the pension committee. Pension committee, I think, has been very pleased with the performance of Chartwell and thought this might be an opportunity to actually see a return on this investment. The pension committee does want to take a look back at this, so the proposal would be that we engage them in this expanded role for 12 additional months, and then we'll do a look back to see if we want to continue with these expanded services. Staff has also been very supportive of the work that's done by Chartwell. We would recommend your approval.
All right, are there questions regarding this recommendation from the city manager?
Mayor, seeing no questions, I move for approval.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Edwards. Motion and second. Please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Bratcher.
Aye.
Mr. Edwards.
Aye.
Mr. Gilly.
Aye.
Mr. McFarland.
Aye.
Mr. Washington.
Aye.
Mr. Young.
Aye.
Mayor Bragg.
Aye. This time we'll consider recommendations of the city attorney with regards to H1N1 preparations, notably temporary policy changes to the Employee Handbook, Section 1003, sick leave policy. You have a copy attached, and also our health insurance. Ms. McGannon.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. Staff, primarily the city manager, the personnel director, myself, and our safety director have been trying to prepare for H1N1. Our safety committee has also had a role. One of the things that seemed to us in our management discussions could be beneficial was to anticipate the fact that there might need to be some temporary modifications of our existing sick leave policies to make it easier from a paper flow for people to be absent when they or members of their family are ill. And there are 3 suggestions presented to you. These would be from this point until the end of May 2010, because that's what the CDC has said they think is going to be the flu season, and that would be to accept faxed or photocopied doctor's excuses rather than insisting on the originals if it is for flu. It would be calling for the reason to be stated on the doctor's excuse, which is something we don't generally do. But that would also, if it is flu, exclude those absences from the calculation of absence that was an abuse of our sick leave policy. If the employee says, I was out because of the flu, even though they don't have a doctor's excuse, we would not be necessarily characterizing that as a sick leave abuse situation, because the current advice is that people not go to the doctor's office for a diagnosis that it's H1N1. For one thing, it takes a long period of time and is an additional cost. Obviously, the supervisors in the personnel office are going to be looking for people who might suspiciously have repeat episodes of the flu. We're not intending to just make a blanket waiver of our policies. The third suggested temporary change is to modify the requirement that the city manager approve any unpaid medical leave that is greater than 3 days. That's currently our requirement. And the suggestion, since that might have people coming in when they were not able to do so, risking exposing staff and making it difficult for them, that if somebody is out of paid sick leave, that they would be able to get an unpaid medical leave without city manager approval if it is 7 days or less, and it is for flu reasons. There may be other changes that the city will make to try and accommodate this if it develops, as some are projecting that it will, but we didn't believe it was necessary to make a permanent change to the city's sick leave policy. But since the council approved the sick leave policy, we wanted to come to you with our recommendation that these temporary changes be made. I'd be happy to answer any questions about those details if you would like.
Thank you, Ms. McGannon. I appreciate the staff being prepared on this temporary policy changes, and I'll ask the council now if they have any questions as to these changes. Any questions from Ms. McGannon? As these are preempted, then is there a motion that we accept this recommendation?
So moved.
Second.
Motion and second. Any questions? Please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Bratcher.
Aye.
Mr. Edwards.
Aye.
Mr. Gilly.
Aye.
Mr. McFarland.
Aye.
Mr. Washington.
Aye.
Mr. Young.
Aye.
Mayor Bragg.
Aye.
Thank you. The other matter relates to health insurance coverage for the H1N1 vaccine. As I'm sure you know, it is not now available, but is projected to be available in approximately a month. The federal government is providing the vaccine without cost, but the question came up as to the cost of administration. Blue Cross Blue Shield had first been in touch with the city and was giving employers such as the city who participate with their program for administration that the employer would pick up 100% of the cost of the injection administration, i.e. the person giving the shot, that there would be no coverage of the H1N1 injection, or that it could be treated as any other injection. Staff's recommendation to you is that the city pick up 100% of the cost. At the time this memo was written, United Healthcare had indicated that it was intending to treat it as a covered service, but was not providing the option of allowing the employer to pick up the cost. Since the packet went out, they have been in touch with Ms. Mahon, and they are intending to offer that. It could either be treated as any other shot, or the employer can pick up all of the cost. And certainly I'm sure the council would wish to be consistent. So the suggestion would be that for the two health insurance providers, whether you wish to accept all of the cost of injection or treat it as any shot under those respective policies. As noted in the last paragraph of my cover memo, there are priorities that the CDC has established for the vaccine. We don't know how many more persons would be able to receive it in terms of the quantity of the vaccine. We don't know how many people pregnant, caregivers for children under 6, et cetera, that I've listed, what the cost would be. So it is very rare that staff would be coming to you with a recommendation to do something without some idea of the cost. But that is the situation now, because we feel it would be beneficial for our employees and our family members to encourage those persons who've been identified as a priority for getting it to remove any economic obstacle to their getting the vaccine. And so that is why we were recommending that the city pick up the cost of the injection, the vaccine itself, of course, being free.
All right, council, are there questions? Do you have any idea of what it might cost, or what per injection, or any liability attached, or?
Well, certainly there wouldn't be any mandate, so I don't think there would be liability. It would be a individual decision whether or not somebody wanted to do that. Some private employers are mandating. We're not anticipating that the city would do that. $15 to $20 is a figure that has been bruited about as the injection cost, but I can't tell you that it would be. But that's the only figure I've got per injection.
How many estimated shots would the city give?
Well, these would be, at this point, we do not believe that the city would be the site of giving the shot the way they were today and will be next week for city employees with the traditional flu shot. We did have someone go to a presentation where the state health director was indicating that some large employers may become a site where distribution, injections would actually be given. We don't know yet that the city would be large enough for that or that it would want to do that. So the expectation is that someone's regular physician would be the one administering the vaccine and making the charge for the injection. We're certainly going to pay attention to the information coming out of Nashville as to whether or not we would be eligible to become an injection site for our employees, but we have had no serious discussion about that because we don't know if it's a possibility yet. So the assumption had been that it would be the regular physician, and not all physicians are apparently going to seek to be providers of this vaccine when it does become available. Employees may need to shop if their regular physician is not going to do that, but I'm sure many will.
Any other questions?
Mayor, if there are none, I move for approval.
Second.
All right, your motion and second. Any questions? Call the roll.
Vice Mayor Bratcher.
Aye.
Mr. Edwards.
Aye.
Mr. Gilly.
Aye.
Mr. McFarland.
Aye.
Mr. Washington.
Aye.
Mr. Young.
Aye.
Mayor Bragg.
Aye. Thank you, Ms. McGannon. If you will, thank members of the staff who worked on that in regards to those preparations if we have to undertake those for H1N1. Thank you. At this time, we'll consider recommendations of the Assistant City Attorney to approve a property exchange agreement with Steel Technologies Incorporated, which was formerly MyTech Steel International, and I guess the city. Is that correct?
Correct.
Mr. Ives, welcome.
Thank you, Mayor, members of council. As you all know, the South Rutherford project, where we relocated a part of that road and improved it from South Church all the way over and past Southeast Broad, is now complete. A significant part of that project was the grade separation between the CSX railroad tracks and South Rutherford. MyTech, of course, Steel Technologies, is located there at the intersection of the railroad and South Rutherford. We had reached an agreement in principle some time ago with MyTech, and that allowed, and they signed a right of entry, which allowed us to go ahead and do the construction and even complete the construction while we still worked out the various details of this. One of the issues, of course, is that constructing the bridge over the railroad tracks eliminated Steel Technologies' access onto South Rutherford. And it also eliminated the access of the property immediately adjacent to Steel Technologies, which is a metal recycling plant that's the property is owned by Mr. Bramlett. The original plans called for a new connector road into Steel Technologies to be placed on the property immediately south of Mr. Bramlett's property. This was going to cause significant damages to Mr. Bramlett's property because he was going to lose some of it on the corner, and it was going to impact his operations. All of the people involved, along with the property owners in this area, the city engineer and his staff, and our design consultants, met a number of times to talk about what the possibilities would be for this. So if we can have the overhead, please.
Very clear.
Technology doesn't seem to be my forte.
Words, not action.
That was Mr. Technology.
See, if we had the computer here, Mayor, we'd just be looking at the computer in front of us.
Focus. Zoom in, out.
MyTech's facility is the large open area here. Rutherford went across this hatched area here to the immediately above MyTech is the former where Rutherford ran until a while ago. After a lot of consultation and different ideas and suggestions, we ended up that MyTech purchased, instead of the city purchasing a portion of this tract, MyTech purchased the entirety of this tract, the one that has the yellow colored on it. That enabled the connector road to be moved further to the south, and that eliminated eliminated most of the incidental damages to the Bramlett property. What we are now doing to finalize this is MyTech is conveying to the city the right-of-way that's colored in yellow, which is the right-of-way for that connector road that has been built. MyTech's also conveying the little box to on the north side of that connector road that provides the entry drive now to the Bramlett property. The city will previously had approved the abandonment, the closure and abandonment of about 170 feet of the east end of Porter Street. There was a small house located off of that street. That house has been removed, so there's no need for that street anymore. I do believe there's an easement, and the easement, of course, is for a utility easement that is being retained. The city will then convey the former right-of-way of Porter Street there to Steel Technologies. Steel Technologies will be using that area along with the remnant of the property they acquired that's to the south of the new connector road to expand their parking lot. Because the city does not have need for the vast majority of the right-of-way of old South Rutherford that is adjacent to MyTech on the north side, we propose to convey everything south of the old center line to MyTech, and also, I'm sorry, to Steel Technologies, and also convey about half of the right-of-way that's north of the old center line to MyTech. We're retaining a sufficient amount of the right-of-way so that we have access for any maintenance and other kinds of work on the bridge structure or any other needs that we have to access any utilities that are in that area. When we shook all this out, the number of square footage, the amount of square footage going from each party to the other is almost identical. I don't know how we did that, but we did. And then, of course, once this part is closed, the city will convey the entry drive there to the Bramlett property, will convey that driveway to Bramlett, and, of course, that'll then be their responsibility to maintain in the future. So what we're asking tonight is to approve the abandonment of the right-of-way as illustrated here on the former South Rutherford, and to approve, now that has been to Planning Commission as a mandatory referral and has been approved by Planning Commission, and then to approve the agreement that's attached with Steel Technologies, and also to approve then and authorize the conveyances of the Porter Street right-of-way and the former South Rutherford right-of-way to Steel Technologies. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions from Mr. Ives? Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to accept this recommendation of the Assistant City Attorney to approve this property exchange with Steel Technologies Incorporated. Motion and second. Please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Bratcher.
Aye.
Mr. Edwards.
Aye.
Mr. Gilly.
Aye.
Mr. McFarland.
Aye.
Mr. Washington.
Aye.
Mr. Young.
Aye.
Mayor Bragg.
Aye. This time we'll consider, thank you, Mr. Ives, for adoption of resolution expressing official intent that certain expenditures to be incurred in connection with certain public works projects and related expenditures for reimbursements to Greenland Drive from Reeves Rogers School to Shawnee Drive being reimbursed from proceeds of notes, bonds, or other indebtedness to be issued or incurred by the city. Ms. McGannon?
This is the legal means to get done what Mr. Griffith wants to do.
Just payment, Mayor Bragg, for recently the project you approved on improvements to Greenland Drive from Reeves Rogers School to Shawnee Drive. That, and we've kept that at the amount of $1.5 million. The improvements have been completed. We're starting to get the bills in, and we need to get those paid.
All right, you have this resolution for adoption. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Motion and second. Thank you. Call the roll, Ms. Wright.
Vice Mayor Bratcher.
Aye.
Mr. Edwards.
Aye.
Mr. Gilly.
Aye.
Mr. McFarland.
Aye.
Mr. Washington.
Aye.
Mr. Young.
Aye.
Mayor Bragg.
Aye.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Griffin. This time we'll consider any beer permit applications.
Mayor, we have two tonight. We have a convenience store at 1710 Braidable Pike, which is a new location, and we have an ownership change and name change for a restaurant at 2021 South Church Street. They have met our requirements as well as the requirements of building and codes.
All right. They meet the requirements. Is there a motion that we approve these beer permits?
So moved.
Second.
Motion and second. Please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Bratcher.
Aye.
Mr. Edwards.
Aye.
Mr. Gilly.
Aye.
Mr. McFarland.
Aye.
Mr. Washington.
Aye.
Mr. Young.
Aye.
Mayor Bragg.
Aye. This time you have before you a revised list of the bills to be considered for payment. If there are any questions regarding any of those, would you please bring those up now?
Mayor, here none, I move we pay the statements.
All right, there's a motion to pay the bills. Is there a
Second.
second? All right, you have a motion and a second. Please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Bratcher.
Aye.
Mr. Edwards.
Aye.
Mr. Gilly.
Aye.
Mr. McFarland.
Aye.
Mr. Washington.
Aye.
Mr. Young.
Aye.
Mayor Bragg.
Aye. At this time, I'd recommend the reappointment of Curtis Harrell to the Board of Gas Examiners and Mr. John Duke to the Urban Environmental Commission. Make that recommendation to you.
Move we approve the mayor's recommendation.
Second.
Motion and second. Please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Bratcher.
Aye.
Mr. Edwards.
Aye.
Mr. Gilly.
Aye.
Mr. McFarland.
Aye.
Mr. Washington.
Aye.
Mr. Young.
Aye.
Mayor Bragg.
Aye. At this time, we'll consider any other business to come before the council. Is there any other business?
Mayor, I just had one quick comment.
Mr. McFarland.
Just to express our sympathy to the Tedder family for Mr. Doug Tedder, who had served on, I believe it was our gas board. He passed away recently, and just to thank his family for the service that he provided to our city and give them our condolences.
Thank you. Any other business to come before the council? If not, you're adjourned.